All right, back again with Mend the Mind, episode 8. Today we've got another crew from Florida State. We got Don and Regan. Don and Regan, we'll give you a sec to kind of introduce yourself. What do you got going on these days?
Yeah. So, yeah,
You got it.
my name's Donovan Parker. I guess you can call me Don for short, as it says on the screen. So I grew up in rural New Jersey, went to school at Furman University, which was in South Carolina. And then from there, went to Florida State University, where right into all these people here while we were getting our master's degree in sports psychology. And then, yeah, became really good friends with Regan. Obviously, we live together now. We're dating.
Good friends.
And life is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Regan, as you said. I'm originally from Kansas, and then, spoiler alert, also went to grad school at Florida State, connected with Nick, Donovan, and Mike over there. And then after that, we did post-grad internships with student-athlete athletic academics. And then in March, we both landed advisor roles in West Virginia athletics. So that's what we're doing these days in Morgantown, West Virginia, helping student athletes get their degrees.
Yeah.
Real quick though, I just so nobody's confused, y'all. I did not go to grad school at Florida State. Like I think we've had this a couple episodes. Yeah, and at Florida State with the grad school, met all these people. Hey, y'all giving me way too much credit. All right, listen, Mike. I got my minor in athletics. All right, so like there was no grad school, there was nothing else for me. Kudos to y'all for rocking that psych program out. It's been phenomenal getting to know y'all. Nick, thanks for making a connection, and then and being a guy, being the man as always, like hosting us. It's been fun. I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
You said podcast. I was like, podcast? No way. But
I know.
no, that's super cool.
Ready to rock it.
Excited you guys are doing this.
Trying to get it off the ground. But yeah, no, we're excited to have both of you guys, as Mike said. You mentioned kind of in an advisor role. Regan, you had some experience at Florida State with that. Donovan, you also had some experience at Florida State. And then Regan, you stayed there a little bit longer. Don, you went down to Tampa at South Florida, University of South Florida. Go Bulls. And now you guys are both at West Virginia. I am curious to hear, like, what is that role like in, like, I guess the elevator pitch? And then flip side of that, Mike, after they finish, did you have any experience with that as an athlete? Because I can tell you at D3 level, we don't have those.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think being an athletic academic advisor is very unique. And I think a lot of people don't fully understand what the role is. I think they hear that and they hear, oh, you pick their classes for them. Great. And then, you move on. But it's so much more than that. Like, we get so intimately familiar with their day-to-day schedule, with assignments that are due. We're sending reminders constantly. Because we see them so frequently, I think it also lends itself to a lot of those kind of deeper developmental conversations of, I'm stressed out and I'm, struggling with sport, so a lot of the more so than just school conversations happen in our offices. And I feel like we're there as kind of a holistic support system, not just get good grades. I don't know what you'd have to add to that, but
yeah, I mean, I just think, whenever you're at, a level of being in an athletics department, helping student athletes that are, really good at what they do in their performances. I feel like there's just like a lot of pressure in that environment. And there was just like schedules are crazy, like just to like see like all that goes into, preparing for a season, recruiting, like making sure like everything is like set up so, student athletes are on a track to be successful, and being able to just kind of learn and see everything that's going on in that realm is cool.
No, that's very accurate I would say it aligns very well with my experience as a student athlete, especially at Florida State, having academic advisors or learning specialists, or even some tutors who stuck around long enough, it's almost as if they become family, truthfully. And I mean, I'm sure y'all agree that the kids that come back and report to you, whether it's y'all are deciding on classes, figuring out majors for some of the freshmen, y'all develop a strong interest and like y'all said, familiarity with them that ties them to you, and it creates this family-like atmosphere where they come in, and a lot of days, like, we weren't talking about school, we weren't talking about class, we weren't even talking about sport. You get to talking about personal life, whether it's things going on back home, whether it's things happening on campus, extracurriculars they want to get involved in. So yeah, I would say that role as like an academic advisor, learning specialist, tutor, whoever it may be, those are super, super important roles at any level, but especially to some of these very, very high level, high performing institutions. Like those roles, the athletic department would not function without them. And I can stand on firm ground saying, I know that like Florida State, we would not be able to function if we did not have academic advisors and people like y'all sitting in those seats helping us get through it. Because those days, they'd be long. I'm talking like, from some of the advisors I know, it was 7 to 9, 7 to 10, having to show up for study tables. And then you start adding travel on top of that. It's absolutely crazy. So hats off to y'all. And as a former student athlete, I appreciate y'all a whole lot for what y'all do.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I think sometimes it is one of those like kind of thankless jobs where, you know, you just get through the day and you hope that you made an impact, but you don't always necessarily know. So it's good to hear that those people in your life, you know, made a lasting impact on you.
For sure. Nick, I don't know if you have a question teed up, but I got like this already getting to it, man. I'm a little energized for it. I want to know, how do y'all connect with your student athletes? What are some of the things that y'all have in place to connect with them, to grow them, to get them to trust y'all and invest and buy into y'all? Because the same way that y'all are invested in them, they're not going to do what you ask them to do if they aren't invested in y'all and they don't think that y'all have their best interest in mind. So what are those things that y'all do?
Yeah, no doubt. I think for me, so I work with women's basketball and wrestling. It's been a lot of like getting to understand their culture as far as, you know, who they are as a student and who they are as an athlete, but also who they are as a person. I tell them all the time that, yes, I want you to do well in your sport and I want you to be successful in the classroom. But at the end of the day, like your mental health and your well-being and your development as a human is what matters to me above all else. So I think just being someone who's familiar with the athletic side of things, but also like their performance as an athlete isn't necessarily what I'm focused on, I think provides them the space to talk about those things a little bit more openly. And, you know, they see me as someone who cares about who they are and not just their achievements, I guess.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we both kind of take, like, in terms of like the relationships, like we're both very person centered. And I think that's something like we really picked up and developed in our own philosophies, you know, when we were kind of in the grad school level, just kind of learning like who we are and how we want to be in terms of like, you know, our versions of ourselves and our support roles. So yeah, I'd say just first and foremost, like putting the person first above all else, because, you know, like you said, there's so many things going on throughout like a student athlete's day that's like could be very overwhelming. It could be, you know, you woke up at 6 a.m. for a lift or some conditioning test, and then, you know, you didn't get back to your dorm or your apartment until 9 p.m. because you were in go mode all day. So I think it's just important that there's people that are aware of that and not just treating each, you know, student athlete as just an athlete, because it's easy to just like, you know, see what they're wearing on their bags or, you know, see them out there when they're performing. But at the end of the day, like, you know, they're people too. And it's easy to kind of look past that. So I think that's something that we really emphasize and try to, you know, do a good job of, which helps us, I think, make it more enjoyable and rewarding, you know, when in these roles.
Facts. For sure.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I heard a quote, Mike, you're going to love this. I know you like one-liners. My coworker dropped this one on me after we had a session and we were debriefing in the car on the way back. Said they don't trust what you know until they know they can trust you.
Facts, 100%.
And I think that stands out from kind of all three of your guys' takes so far. One question that I have coming from a similar sports psych background is, are there any classes, theories, ways of consulting stylistically or philosophically that you see yourself leaning on a lot more than you thought you would?
That's a good question.
I feel like it's always important to take like, I think, a wider perspective, and like I always try and put myself in their shoes. And a lot of times it's like when you're dealing with freshmen, you know, maybe they think they know it all, or maybe they don't. It's just like taking like that confidence building approach is, you know, treat you like a person first, but like, you know, praise them for their efforts when they're doing good, and like being like, hey, like I know you're having a tough day, or I know this is not easy, and just kind of, you know, letting them know that like you're going to be their number one supporter, and giving them like tips here and there. Like we're not doing hour-long sports psychology sessions, but it's like more so our work is like, all right, like we've built the relationship. Like when can we sneak in like that bit of information that is going to make a difference? You know, I think we hear all the time, like their sleep, like sleeping is awful. Like you're staying up late, you're watching Tik Tok because that's how you decompress after a super long day. But then you're only getting 3-4 hours of, you know, quality sleep. And then the next day you just start it all over again. So just like getting to a level where you can feel comfortable giving them advice and they can trust you to receive that. You know, I think it is really important, and, you know, picking that person-centered approach helps.
Yeah, I'll echo like the rest recovery piece. I think, you know, we all know that Division I student athletes are probably all lacking for sleep. I think in addition to that, one of the bigger things that I've pulled from sports psych is just like the growth mindset, like Donovan kind of touched on with freshmen. That first round of tests for a lot of the freshmen on my caseload was rough. But if, you know, maybe we failed the first one and then we got a C on the next one because we figured out how to study for a college test, just instilling some confidence in them in that way. And I have a sign in my office that says we can do hard things, because I can't tell you the amount of times during the day I hear, well, that's going to be hard. The test was hard. This is hard. Practice was hard, like all these things. So just kind of reminding them that your life is hard, but you're also doing it and you're overcoming all of these challenges and all of that stuff. So just reminding them how special they are too, because I think a lot of the time they're used to just, you know, being put down, whether it be like coaches or professors or other support people.
Right. Man, that's Regan, you bring up a good point about tests. And this is very much so just kind of on the fly right here, this thought.
Yeah.
Have either of you noticed any difference in the preparation of some of the student athletes for the ones who maybe went to like a private school or a charter school versus coming from a public school? And if so, what are some of those gaps or like pitfalls that some of those kids can watch? Because there's no telling who this will reach. This may hit the right person, and they may need this information. What are some of those gaps that y'all see that y'all would recommend those kids to hit on and work on as they make that transition?
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about this week, actually, with one of my freshmen in particular has been struggling with tests and assignments. And so I kind of wanted to take a step back because he seems to understand the content when we just have a conversation about it. I was like, walk me through what sitting in class looks like for you. And he was like, well, you know, like I pull out my laptop and I start looking at what I had to do for the week. And I was like, wait, no, like, so you're missing the lecture. Like you're not actually getting the content that your teacher's talking about. Okay, like what's next? Like what else does it look like? Oh, you know, like I text my friends back. The group chat blows up all day. So I make sure I'm not missing anything in the group chat. And so like, and I think it was good for him to sit there and verbalize like, oh, I'm not paying attention in class.
Right.
Like just having your butt in a seat in class is not active participation and engagement, and you're not actually retaining the material. And so I think the biggest thing, at least that I've seen on my caseload, is when you're in class, really being fully present in class and taking notes and asking questions. It sounds so simple, but I think sometimes they think, oh, I was in class, so I was good. I got all the material. I'm fine. Yeah. But it's so much more of an active participation thing than I think a lot of students realize.
Yeah. Definitely. And like, I know you mentioned like differences in schooling, right? And I think it is like kind of clear, like depending on, your socioeconomic economic status, what type of system you came up in. Like me working with the football team, we get a lot of, young kids, because they really are kids, that don't have really good education backgrounds, or, with the COVID years of being in high school, you were online for 2 years probably, where you really didn't have the opportunity to be physically present and learn and interact and have build some of those social skills during a crucial period of your life. So you definitely see a gap. Like, one of them is like definitely math. I've noticed like there's been like numerous people where like I see them working on math, and I'll like check in on them. And I'll try to like help them. I'm not a math expert, but like sometimes I feel like I'm explaining like float, like y equals mx plus b. Like I felt like I did that in middle school, but some of these kids, they just haven't had a good quality education experience. So there is like this catch up period now. It's like, all right, like you don't have the skills that the typical college student may come in with, but now you're in college and you have to just figure it out, because you're at that level where things are going to move fast. There's going to be a lot on your plate, and you just kind of have to, figure it out or fall behind. And that's kind of where we come in, is like, we make sure that, you're being watched and supported, and we pick up on those things of where we can try our best to give you those supports.
Yeah. That's good.
I think one thing that keeps coming up is the idea of a lot on your plate. Definitely at the student athlete level, and D1 only adds to that. There's a lot of things to juggle. You've mentioned taking perspectives as well, which to me stands out as a huge piece of how you're going to tackle your plate. Mm-hmm. Well, are you looking at the whole pie, or are you trying to knock one slice out, right? Yeah. I figured I'd bring this up and get some thoughts from you guys, because I also heard Regan mention the idea of being present. And I think it goes beyond sports, but just generally for anybody listening who's looking for ways to apply and take away. What are some of the best ways to juggle things when you have this mountain in front of you and you need to make progress, but it's kind of paralyzing?
That's a good question. I don't want to invalidate anything that you said, Nick, but I want to add to it. This is not the content we produce meant solely for Division I athletes. I don't want anybody to misunderstand like the direction we're headed. So whether it's 2, 3, JUCO, high school, wherever you are at in your student athlete life, or just life in general, understand like there are things that you can take from this, kind of like a grocery store approach. You get what you need. If it's something that you don't want or that you don't like, just kind of leave it, but take what you can and learn from this. So don't let some of the conversation that gets steered towards Division I. That's where a lot of our experience is, and some of the things we've encountered. Don't let that dissuade you from listening in and continue to pick up on some of these things that we're dropping inside of here. But I think that's a really, really good question, Nick. Will you double back on it one more time?
Yeah. So how would you recommend for anyone listening, or anyone that you cross paths with, whether they're athlete, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, teens, wherever, how would you recommend going about juggling things and being present where you're not looking at this mountain of stuff to do and you can actually make progress?
Yeah, great question. Donovan kind of mentioned the schedules, right? For some of these guys, like I've noticed that with especially my like women's basketball ladies, they rely 100% on teamworks to tell them what they have to do, where they have to be, and what is going on with them that day. And it's on staff to make sure all of those obligations are in there. If I don't put in like a weekly meeting time with me, they're not going to show up, not because they have bad intentions or anything, but because they have just they're so busy. They've learned so much to rely on what is in Teamworks. So for me, a way that I've kind of helped with that is just build into the structure that they're already used to, which is Teamworks. And so I'll put in like assignment reminders, study for this test, a week out or whatever, because I think when they're used to like, okay, well, I have to check my syllabus for this, but I rely on Teamworks for my, the whole rest of my life. I think just giving them kind of a one-stop shop where they can check Teamworks. Okay, these are the assignments. These are the meetings. This is when practices. This is when I meet with the nutritionist. This is when I meet with Regan. This is when I meet with the learning specialist. Like just giving them a very streamlined way to stay on top of everything that they need to be on top of in a week, I've seen has been really beneficial.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you. Like there's a lot of organized structure in like the schedules. And just to kind of take it from a different lens, I think it's important to like have them acknowledge or gain some awareness of like, when are you factoring in the you time, because like within the busy, hustle and bustle of a day, like if you don't give yourself a moment or a time to kind of reset or just, recharge or just turn your brain off, like you're not going to be able to get to that day and feel good by the end of it. So I think one of those things that I think is really important when you're trying to tackle all those things is just like, make sure you're carving out time for yourself, asking the questions of, figuring out what your interests and hobbies and passions are, or just like what you like to do, when you have the option to choose what to do with your time. Mm-hmm. And then being like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, how can you still find that time in this crazy schedule of your day? Because if you are able to get that you time, then I think that just allows you to go into things with more ease and less, I have to be here, I have to do X, Y, and Z, and you're just kind of always on go mode. Those quick little like recharges, I think, kind of help me tackle my days. And I think it when I see it in other people, it helps them kind of get through theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think those are both phenomenal examples. And Don, I think you kind of segued into something I wanted to bring up, or I guess another example, but I found a lot of comfort, balance, perspective in having friends outside of my sport, having friends who are not athletes, people who are, some people hate me for it, having some narcs, man. You gotta have some narcs on your roster. All right, listen, if you don't, you'll go crazy. And I think if you do, it just provides another outlet, like people you can talk to about life, just things that are happening outside of your sport, outside of the athletic department, whether it be good, bad, who's winning, who's losing, who's performing well, who got kicked off the team. Like a lot of times those things, they just consume you. And when it's around you 24/7, you start to lose yourself. So having some friends outside of sport, I think provides like a awesome perspective on just like the normal student life and what other students are doing. And then that leads into involvement. Get involved, not beyond your means, and don't stretch yourself thin, but get involved. Like for me, I started getting involved with Greek life, some student leadership organizations on campus. Again, it's just another way to build community outside of your sport, because it's really hard when a large part or portion of your pie or the area that you're working in, if that's going bad or good, that becomes like the centerpiece. So let's say it is going bad. Everything else seems to become like a suck zone for it, and everything else seems like it's going bad. Find some wins that you can get, and wins can just be having some balance. Like, all right, this one area of my life, it may not be going the greatest, but over here, I feel like I'm doing well. Like my friend group is good. I get to hang out with people. They want me to be around. I don't have my coach breathing down my neck. Just little things like that, I think help out a lot. And then lastly, be honest. Being honest with yourself, your professors, your academic advisors, like telling somebody, look, I'm overwhelmed. I'm swamped. I need help. Somebody, I'm here. Like I'm raising my hand. I'm here. Somebody please help me out. Just so I can create that balance. Especially I can remember little freshman Michael just in a daze, just like kind of walking around campus like, oh, okay, this isn't bad. And then boom, out of nowhere, brain hits me like, okay, wait, where did all this just come from? Whether it was workload, traveling, just things like that. Tell people you need help. Tell people you need help, because y'all are resources. Y'all have a resources who can help out students if y'all don't have the answer. So those three things I found to be a huge help in helping me get through all 5 years of my schooling. Definitely.
Yeah. I think another piece that has recurred a couple of times, indirectly, the support system. You mentioned you play a role as a support system for the athletes. I think over time, we kind of get into what happens when you do or don't have that support system. So indirectly, Mike referred to it as well with the idea of people off the team, balancing your resources, having eggs in different baskets, things like that. And I kind of want to throw it back for Mike. It's going to make a lot more sense. For Don and Regan, it might not make as much sense. But when we talked with Trey and Morgan about transitioning from athletics to life, I think the people who had the support systems and those extra perspectives, to put it in Don's words again, did better at transitioning out of athletics. The people who had all their eggs in the athletics basket struggle sometimes when they're no longer that athlete, or when COVID hits. That's tough. Similarly with math, and you're not an in-school student anymore, and maybe you don't value the material a ton, things get a little bit trickier. You don't see as quality results, I think, as you can say. The other piece that I wanted to talk about is over time. You guys phrase everything in very, I'm going to say autonomy, supportive ways. I'm not going to dance around it, but this idea of controlling versus limit setting when you're helping someone. You can tell someone to go do your homework. You can tell them to go check whatever box, or you can help set limits and boundaries that encourage them to promote those behaviors themselves, give them a little self-initiation. Again, not in athletics, but in life, limit setting tends to be really good. You don't want full freedom. You also don't want someone telling you what to do all the time. And so when we talked about having you time and slicing the pie, to me, my head went to motivation and the idea of, like, how much are you doing because you want to do it? Because that's where that you time comes in for me. If anybody has thoughts on that, pause. If not, we've got another question for you guys.
Tee it up. Roll the next question. You double back if we need.
When you have trust, I think it's infinitely easier to do the limit setting approach and avoid the controlling approach. Even if things are phrased in a controlling manner, if someone trusts you, it's not bad. You're able to endorse whatever kind of comes out of your best friend's mouth, even if they're giving you tough love. But if a random stranger gives you tough love, it's going to be tough. You're not going to like that very much.
Yeah.
That's very interesting in academics right now when we get to the idea of the transfer portal, I think. Because to me, one of the less talked about pieces of it, and I'm very curious to hear all your takes on, is you don't have to stay at a university 4 years. You don't have to build trust with coaches. You may just want to go where you can perform and then transfer to a bigger school, but the development might be more on you and less on the coaching staff. And so does that undermine trust? I don't know. How do you guys see the relationships between trust and institutions, staffs via the transfer portal?
Yeah, that's obviously a big part of our lives now, working in college athletics. I think the first thing that popped into my head was the fun dynamic that we get to play of being a supporter for the student athlete, but also having to report things to coaches. Sometimes I have to report things I don't want to report, but I think the philosophy that I have taken is that, like, if you can be honest with me about whatever reason it was that you missed class, about, why we didn't turn in this assignment, whatever, you and I are going to have a conversation about that first. I'm not just going to go snitch to coach about you, because I don't want them to feel like they can't tell me things. I don't want them to feel like they can't be honest. If you missed an assignment because you needed to get an extra hour of sleep, okay, we'll take the 0 on a discussion board, that's fine if you needed sleep. So I think with the trust piece and how it relates to the transfer portal and the staffs is just like the student athletes need to feel supported, and they need to feel like we actually are prioritizing who they are as a person. Like, the athlete piece can happen anywhere, but being supported for who you are as a human being is not going to happen everywhere.
Really good point. Really good point.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said, Regan. But yeah, I'd like to kind of touch on that. It is really interesting because I feel like it is a very controlled environment. So if we go on that, motivational piece, like a lot of things when you're on a team, it's like you're told to do this. It's a very set schedule. You're told these are the consequences. And if you don't do this at this time, these are the consequences. Like for us, I'll be honest. Like if one of our student athletes on the football team, this is a single assignment, could be worth very minute points. They're pushing plates the next morning. And like, that's the consequence. And it's a very controlled environment. So for me, it's always been like, that was a challenge, but how do I still give autonomy and still fit within this system? But also being in the world to kind of streamline this, because I know we talked about like NIL and transfer portal. That does have an effect on your everyday thoughts. You're thinking in the back of your head as a young student athlete, oh, maybe this isn't what I signed up for. Like maybe if I went somewhere else, the system is different and it would lend me more success. Or coach yelled at me today or something I didn't agree with. Like, I know I'm still like really good at what I do, or I feel like I did the right thing. So there is a lot more sway in terms of, oh, I could just enter the transfer portal. And the reality is it's not always that easy, right? Like it's easier to be like, oh, the grass is greener on the other side. But I think that there was like, because the statistics have been blowing up in terms of like the amount of student athletes that have entered the transfer portal. I want to say like a year ago, it was like 50% of the people that were entering the portal, and don't quote me on this being an exact number, but it was around like half were like sitting in the portal and like not getting a scholarship somewhere else. Yeah. So you pretty much put all your eggs in one basket. And, if you don't have the film or the tape or like the relationship with another coach, you're just saying like, I hope someone picks me up, or you feel like you're good enough, but there's not enough scholarships out for everyone, because not everyone is like a 4-star, 5-star athlete at the end of the day. And yeah, we see all the stories of like the top athletes that have 20 offers as soon as they enter the portal. But the reality is like, that doesn't work for everyone. Like if you don't have the clout so-and-so that some other people have, like it could be like a really tough decision. So it is something I'm like always kind of cautious around. Like when I hear like, hey, I'm thinking about the transfer portal, here are my reasonings. And I'm always like understanding, like I can get why someone would want to, take their chances and see what else is out there. But it's scary. Like it's not as easy and as fluid as some may make it out to be.
No, I totally agree with both of y'all. And I think this is a prime example, or I won't say a prime example, but a very, very close example of what versus who. You might have you might have the skills, the ability, the talent. But sometimes it's like the who or who can get you connected, because I really think that trust is needed. If you got people jumping in the transfer portal, you'd be a fool to think that I couldn't pick up the phone if I was an academic advisor, or if I'm an assistant coach or a head coach somewhere. I can't pick up the phone and call another head coach or another compliance specialist and ask about a kid. Hey, you got this kid, Nick Davis, that's in the transfer portal. I mean, it's no secret at this point. He's in the transfer portal. Give me some information on him. Like, tell me what's going on. Tell me what he's like. Is there somebody who can vouch for this kid? Because if there's a reason he's leaving here, I don't want those same reasons to show up within my program. So again, I think that what versus who is really important, and who you can have in your corner when it comes down to it. Like, utilize a transfer portal, get the best collegiate experience that you can get. You got one shot at this. Do what you can to make it the best for you, but also don't burn bridges along the way. I mean, some may have to get burned. Like it just happens. It's inevitable, I think, at some points. But if you don't have to burn a bridge, don't burn a bridge. Like, be good to people, build those relationships. And if it doesn't work out, you gave it your best shot, and you decide that somewhere else is a better fit and a better option for your collegiate experience, then take it and run with it and do what you got to do. But I think that trust piece is going to be huge, because I don't know if y'all are involved with it, but there's like N4A, there's N4A. There are a couple other ones that I'm forgetting, but I know that's one in particular that I was looking at getting involved with while I was in school. I know that's huge. They have conferences all the time. Again, all these academic advisors and student help specialists from across the country get together. I'm sure they exchange information. I'm sure y'all could call other people at different universities to ask about a student. Like, word of mouth is going to get around pretty quickly, especially with technology nowadays and the resources that you have right in front of you. It's extremely, extremely easy to get information on a kid. So
Definitely.
I'm going to throw that out to the workplace as well. If you're looking for a job, what do? When you get the interview, they check your resume. They're going to see these references. They're going to call them. They're going to check how you were previously. And so again, not limited to sports. I like the idea of this what versus who. And I love the idea of don't burn bridges. I would connect it back to something that we touch on quite a bit, Mike, the idea of the process versus outcome.
Yeah.
And to tell more on what that connection looks like. If you are giving a relationship or a person, hey, I want this relationship because you can do X, Y, Z for me. And when you finish with them, you're done with them, right? Or you burn a bridge because you didn't get what you want. Not always great. You mentioned there's some times where this might need to be done. But if you can look at relationships in a sense of this is an opportunity for development regardless of the outcome, and treat that person as an ends in themselves rather than a means to an end, it tends to work out a lot better. I know for me, especially with relationships you care about, I would rather walk away from the table saying like I tried my best than 3 years from now I regret it because so-and-so now is doing something that could benefit me. So that's huge, I think, beyond the sports level, but definitely within a transfer portal era. I also think the parallel to the business world is NIL scholarships and pay. Tying that back to controlling environments, that is a controlling factor. If you're doing something for NIL money, if you're doing something for a scholarship, if you're doing something because you need to hit a sales quota, suddenly the motivation may seem like there's less you time or things coming from you. So I think that's an interesting angle that I also wanted to ask you guys about. In my head, I was also like, do teams stack NIL and scholarships strategically? I know, Mike, we've talked about FSU uses their scholarships strategically on the track team. But do the best players get the best of both worlds? Or if somebody has an NIL deal enough to cover their whole tuition, that's on them and it's expected they use that for that, and then they can give a scholarship out to somebody else. I think that's I'm guessing no, but maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised.
Can you say the question?
Yeah.
So let's say my Auburn Tigers, hypothetically, they have a big NIL collective.
Sure.
Ton of money they can hand out to athletes. That's separate from the scholarship pool that they have, to my understanding. Scholarships from the university, NIL outside in short terms. Do the best players get the best of both? Or oftentimes is the best player going to just receive the NIL because they want to pay him? And the scholarship, therefore, can go to maybe a tier 2 player so they can keep a higher overall talent level on the teams.
To my understanding, it's like completely coach's decision how funds are distributed. Like the student athletes can, buy into the collectives and all of those things, but I still think there's an element where it's left up to like coach what they then do with the scholarship piece, at least. So, I mean, yeah, I guess, again, to your point of like control and autonomy, like even when they are making decisions, there's still then layers of decisions that are made for them afterwards.
Right. And then to touch kind of on the NIL piece, we've kind of been told from like a compliance perspective that like, if you're an athletics employee, you cannot be like dishing out NIL deals or like being in negotiations. Like that is a NCAA violation as of now.
Yeah.
And it's very complex because it's very still new in the world of athletics. And there's definitely things happening that probably shouldn't be happening in terms of what's quote unquote, a rule and okay to do. But I would say from a football perspective, I think the highest recruited athletes probably get the best NIL deals. You know, there's, in a way, it's almost like free agency. It's like, we can get you this type of deal, and it looks like this. And that's kind of a sales pitch in a way, to a 17-year-old, 16-year-old kid, as crazy as that sounds. Like, it's almost like with NIL, it's kind of taken that professionalism and brought it down to the college level, in some of these sports that are, you know, bringing in a lot of money, and there's a lot of influence with NIL there.
Another money piece too that, like, I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with, is the Alston money for academics. And
That's pretty crazy.
That adds a whole nother layer. Nick, I'm gonna have to hate on the SEC really quick, but
Go Vandy, huh?
there's money allocated for literally just if student athletes are remaining eligible. Okay, I think it's like they're eligible for like $5,000 per year if they remain eligible and they don't leave and all these things.
Oh, wow.
So that's at the NCAA level. And then the conferences get to decide what other stipulations they want to put on. So the Big 12, I believe the way that they have it set up is like whatever percentage scholarship you're on, like you're allotted that percentage of whatever the max is. Like coaches can also decide like who they want to give the most money to based on scholarships.
Yeah.
The SEC says any student athlete who remains eligible gets max regardless. So what a recruiting tool, right?
Fire.
If the Auburn soccer coach, women's soccer coach, right? So a sport that isn't like a football or a basketball where they're all on full scholarship, can say, well, I have guaranteed an extra $5,000 for you per year, as long as you maintain a 2.0 GPA, right? So there's all of these just really bizarre things happening at the NCAA level and then conference level that's making conference, conflicts even worse.
Yeah. And I think that's, first of all, take a stab at the Big Ten here. No way they can do that with 17 teams. There's no way.
I'll find a way.
It is an interesting layer. I actually, down the road, I subscribe to the Pate State material. The kind of naturally runs a college football podcast, but eventually I think the TV rights deals will pay the players' salaries, if you will. I think that's where we're headed, which does favor the Big Ten. So that'll be interesting when just being on a SEC roster grants you $15,000, $20,000 a year. Can't wait for those days. Wish I was an athlete then.
Right.
But I kind of want to add a little bit of depth to this. So it's easy to talk about scholarships and NIL in the sense of from an institutional standpoint, but I want to talk about what that does on a team level, especially for those who have been on a team. I have long been, I guess you could call me a D2 hater. I don't actually have any hate for D2, but I do prefer D1 and D3 for the principle that at D1, I think you get the highest level of competition. And at D3, I think you get usually a higher level of education. The middle ground gets a little bit foggy to me because D3 is all about just enjoying your sport. You got a bunch of kids out there who didn't want to stop after high school for the most part, or that's just who they are and that's what they do, so they keep doing it. The D1 level scholarships and now NIL has really allowed you to make enough money back where you need to keep doing the sport, where kind of that is your now motivation to do it. D2 doesn't have a ton of either. I love that it opens the pool, especially for skill levels, for other people to get scholarship money. But I think you see the most burnout at the D2 level because the competition isn't as fierce. I know for running, at least, a lot of D3 teams could put out the local D2 quality teams. in terms of talent and rosters and things like that. There's got to be a way to fix that and make D2 super competitive. That's more of an NCAA thing, which I don't think they'll ever touch on. But I do think it's interesting at the team level how scholarships and NIL is broken down, and then how that directly affects team motivation, team cohesion, and things along those lines.
So real quick before we dive in, I was looking up a couple things here. Reading it down, I think I hit a spot on when y'all identified that NIL and scholarships are totally separate. It doesn't look like universities necessarily stack scholarships and NIL to spread out scholarships. Even though that's a great idea. It's a great idea. But it looks like the NIL deals that student athletes get, it can potentially reduce some of the need-based money that they would get from like FAFSA or some of the other governmental parties or government parties that would then provide them with money. So that's what it looks like it's doing. It drives up what they call your family income or your annual earnings, whether it's just your parents, whether that be single or a double household here, plus whatever it is that you make. So that NIL money is in a totally separate pot than that university scholarship, which makes a lot of sense, which makes a ton of sense. But yeah, that's a good idea to stack that and to spread it out. And then to jump back to your point about how does that affect the team? I want to pose a question on this question. Is it the money that affects the team, or is it the person that affects the team? But I know money can kind of cause a shift in that. But like when I've been following Colorado, as I'm sure many people have over the past this year. And I saw that Shedeur Sanders drives a $190,000 car. It's absolutely insane, right? Like, give me like a quarter of that. Give me a quarter of that. I'm good for a little minute. But $190,000. He's the starting quarterback. For those who don't know, Deion Sanders' son, and the kid is balling out. Like through 3 games, maybe 4, depending on how you look at it. He put up some very, very impressive numbers. And early on in the season, people were talking about him being a Heisman candidate. Even though he has, through his NIL deals, is able to drive a $190,000 car, he still appears to be a phenomenal leader on that team, sets an example, sets the bar high, and maintains a standard that his coach and or dad and the program have set since the beginning of the season. So again, is it a money issue, or is it a person specific issue?
That's so tough. That's so tough to like. I mean, I love the idea, but I don't know. Like, I think it's going to depend on a case by case basis. Like, if you're someone who has strong values and you've built character from a young age, like maybe the money doesn't have as much sway and pull on someone who has some of those more external values and rewards. Like Shedeur Sanders, he kind of grew up around money too. It's not like, he's had the same background and coming up of a lot of other guys in college athletics. So, I mean, I think that could play a role potentially. Is yes, money's there, but like maybe money wasn't always a huge value to him. Like he's always kind of believed in himself and what matters to him. So yeah, I think it kind of depends on the person for whether it's more about the money or the person. That would be my best guess.
I think because Nick, you were asking like, how does that affect the team? I've seen it kind of in a couple different ways, working with, a sport like women's basketball where they're all full scholarship, and then wrestling where it's a lot of partial scholarships. I've seen some interesting dynamics where the guys will figure out, like who's on book scholarship and who's on what percentage and stuff like that. And I watched it happen in front of me in my office. I handed a stack of textbooks to one of the guys who's on book scholarship.
Yeah.
And then his friend who was with him looks at me and he was like, well, where's my books? And I was like, I can't get your books for you, bro. Like that. And he was like, well, why am I not on book scholarship? And I had to say, like, honestly, like that's a coach decision.
Right.
And so I encouraged him to go talk with coach, but I could see how that would be maybe partially like embarrassing, especially like this was like right when I started. I don't know why some guys are on book scholarship and some aren't. And so I could just see, from a D1 student athlete who's already probably very self-critical and hard on themselves, now having a layer of like, well, why didn't coach allot me this money? Why did they allot this money to this guy? So I could just see that being a very interesting mental phenomenon.
Yeah. I think it's super interesting beyond the sports that get a bunch of scholarships to hand out as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a running team and you have 5 full scholarships you can give out, and the coach chooses to give out 5 full scholarships to the 5 scoring individuals, the 6th guy usually has it does depend on the individual. They're usually pretty burnt out at the sport when they see the guys that are 10, 20 seconds faster than them in a 8K getting more money.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect you showing up to practice? Well, in the workplace, if you're doing the same job as somebody else, but their salary is 65 and yours is 60, and you might think of yourself as more competent, suddenly I don't want to give my all at work. You can do the reverse as well, as Mike said with Shadur. Some people are just built to work and grind. I think Mr. Caleb is a great example of that. He just wakes up and goes. Regan, you do it as well. All through the Masters, 5 a.m. at the gym. That's just who you are. That's what you do. Whether there's money or not, it probably doesn't affect you too much. To pick a side, I would say that the money is more impactful than the mindset, for Mike's question. But I think it's more incentive based. I think if you can lose the money, that's when the money becomes more important. Or if you can get more money, that's when it becomes important. NIL is interesting because most of the structures, to my knowledge, are incentive based. It's not just here's $2 million. It's, hey, here's a $2 million that you can get. It's not guaranteed. You're going to have to hit this number of achievements and hit these statistics, and then we're going to give you the money.
Yeah.
That's not true everywhere. That also brings up an interesting point with your Alabamas. They don't need to guarantee you any money. You need to play for them to get the money. Your smaller SEC schools, even like your Florida, now they're going to give you money because they need to climb the ladder and take down Georgia. So those kids can get money up front a lot easier than the kids at Georgia and Alabama can. Makes for a little bit different team culture. There's a lot of pieces in play. Coaches matter a lot. The leadership in general matters a lot. The kids definitely matter. But I would buzz in the money as a little bit more influential, especially when it's incentive based.
As we're on the topic of money and scholarships, whether it be NIL or just scholarship from the university, I want to make a very, very clear point and statement to ask questions. If you do not understand something, if a coach has not made something black and white about a scholarship, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, partial, full, 4 years, ask those questions, because a lot of the scholarships that coaches or universities give out are only good for 1 year. And you can hear full ride, and full ride doesn't mean a full 4 years, or a full ride doesn't cover a 5th year if you have to redshirt, in extreme cases like we just experienced, a COVID year. That does not cover all that. Now, I'm sure the language and stipulations have changed given the nature of what happened in NCAA the past couple years. But ask those questions. Don't be afraid to say, hey, coach, like, I don't understand this. What does this mean about my money? Where will it be going? How much will I get back? Will I have to pay for books? Will I have to cover my rent if I move off campus? Ask those questions. And then coaches, like, be transparent. Don't be crabs. Don't be crabs and trying to like pull one over on kids. Like, it's going to happen. It probably still does happen. But just be transparent with those student athletes and let them know up front, like, hey, I think you're good at what you do. You're a great recruit for us, but this is all we can offer you right now. Like, this is all we have for you. I love it if you join my team and my program, but I understand if you have to make a business decision for yourself and you decide to go elsewhere. Be transparent, have that conversation, because I think it goes back to relationships. if you can have that transparent conversation with that student athlete, that kid coming out of high school or somebody that's transferring to your university, it's like, all right, if I'm getting this level of transparency up front, it probably makes you feel more comfortable about making a decision to go with that program, to be with them, or to not. So I think those two things are critical, or absolutely critical when it comes to the process of choosing a university, choosing a team. And then, Nick, you tied it back to work and being at work as well. Don't be afraid to ask for an increase in salary, to say, hey, these are the skills I have. This is what I bring to the table. This is my experience. I think I should be compensated a lot more, or not even a lot more, whatever that number is. I should be compensated this much more for that. These companies have the money. The universities have the money. The NCAA has the money. Like Regan, I didn't even know that they had money for just staying eligible. Like I kind of want to call up my compliance department, like, yo, what's going on? Because I don't know if y'all remember, there was a year, I think it was when I was still in school. So I'm gonna say it probably affected student athletes from 2009, I would say, going back right around there. And the cost of attendance, that's what it was. The cost of attendance went up, or it was determined that the cost of attendance for a student athlete to be in school was X amount of dollars. And that dated back to whatever that retroactive date was. The NCAA started cutting checks for guys who weren't even in college anymore. They could have been in the NFL playing. I remember it vividly. There were some guys in the NFL, and some of the guys that were still on the team, they would call them and say, hey, there's this cost of attendance check that's being handed out. Call so-and-so, email so-and-so, and see if you get one. I know guys who got $5,000, $7,000, some $10,000, because that cost of attendance grew. Ask a question, get your money. Y'all hear it all the time. Secure your bag. All right. You can be the only one that's worried about your bag. You got to get your bag however you can. So.
Yeah. And what I'm going to do is similar. You tied it back to relationships, Mike. I'm going to tie it back to stress as well. I think 2 points to come back to and start to wrap up. But when your plate gets full. So if you're running for a scholarship, I keep going for running. So you're playing pickleball for a scholarship. You got esports, some of the newer sports. When you're playing pickleball for a scholarship, and maybe an injury comes, maybe a coaching change, something that's a little bit out of your control, it's likely that you're going to feel a little bit more stressed out, especially if the scholarships are not guaranteed, like Mike said, across a number of years. That mountain, that circle of stress, that pie of stress, it's going to be tough. You're going to be needing to lean on better time management. And so that's the other direction I want to tie it back to. Let's start with the relationships that Mike brought up. Quick tips for building relationships. What do you want and what should you be giving to those relationships? We can go around the horn.
Is this exclusive to athletics, like personal life? What direction? Or is this just a holistic view look at it?
Anywhere in life.
Okay.
Honesty and transparency. I know Mike was just talking about it, but like, that's how you really build the trust, is like knowing that like whatever comes out of my mouth or whatever comes out of your mouth, like that's spoken word in terms of like, it's rock solid. Because I think especially early on in relationships, if you make a promise, go to athletics, if you make a promise as a coach and as a student athlete, you don't feel like that promise has been fulfilled, like that's immediately like that hurts the growth of a relationship. So I think especially early on, it's just like really making sure like that everything that you're saying is like 100% true, and like you're gonna hold yourself accountable from your end of making sure like what I told you, what I promised you, like that's me, and I'm gonna follow through on those promises. I think is really important.
I think in addition to that, the willingness and desire to like build together, I feel like that concept talks about a lot in terms of like romantic relationships. And, we've always said that we really value our relationship for that reason. But I think the same can be true too for, a coach athlete, an advisor athlete, teammates. type of relationship, because in that way I can say, if you give me 6 hours of study hall a week, I'm going to make sure that I do what I can do to get you the college degree in 4 years, so there's like a little bit of the give and take and the willingness to build and to grow together.
Yeah.
That's good. You got one, Nick?
Yeah, I do. To me, it's the biggest general topic is enthusiasm. You got to want to be there in anything. So if I go into a room and I can tell someone doesn't want to be there, it's a lot more work for me to convince them to want to be there. It's not impossible, but it's not what I want to spend my time doing. Yeah. I want to start on the foundation of enthusiasm. I know my favorite professor in college knew whether you were going to be a TA for him in the first 10 seconds of when you walked in the room. I told Mike this. That's how I did interviews when I was at Fleet Feet as well. You got 10 seconds to show me you want to be here. And then we'll go from there. With that, I think is also included perspective taking, which is something you guys talked about. I don't just want to listen to your thoughts. I don't just want to put out my thoughts. I want to get other people's thoughts. I want to take a collective of multiple perspectives and different angles. And then I want to choose whichever one works best for me. I'd say those two are probably the strongest across the board.
Yeah, that's good. To wrap us out on that, I guess on this question, I got 3 things. The first one is being willing to listen, having compassion, and then also being willing to put your pride aside. And I think the pride is probably going to be the biggest one for me. Being willing to admit when you're wrong. And I think it ties back into what Don was saying about just having that transparency and honesty with somebody. Like if you can openly, nobody wants to say they're wrong, like ever. I'm sure we've all been in arguments where we know we're wrong at some point and we're like, we are too far in. Like I cannot turn around now. Like I'm back down now. Like it's a wrap. Like I'm going to look crazy. But to be able to say, no, you got it. Like you're right on this one. I'm wrong. It makes the relationships, it can be work. It can be personal, athletics, however you want to look at it, whatever that relationship is, the power in saying, my bad, I was wrong, you're right, or my bad, that's my fault, I messed up. I think there is so much power in admitting that because you are in a way, I guess like deferring to someone. You're like, hey, you got it. This is yours. Take it and run with it. And hopefully that opens up some room for them to reciprocate some of those same feelings. Like, hey, look, that's my bad. I messed up on this one. And so now that you both know that you can trust each other to say, hey, this is where we went wrong. This is where I went wrong. Let's get it right next time. I think that's huge. So that pride piece, I think is huge.
I completely agree. People would rather be right than happy far too often. And it's so frustrating. Yeah. We're all guilty of it. Yeah. Go in with a mindset that growth is what you're looking for, not, again, that outcome. If you're looking to grow and come to the best conclusion, I think that's going to benefit you a lot. And that goes back to Mike, you saying willing to listen. So, yeah, put that pride aside. The second one that I wanted to get to was back to the time management. I kind of thought if you guys have some, I was thinking when you were talking about it, what's the way that people can kind of practice time management and a little bit of self-control or self-regulation in that aspect? I know, Don, you mentioned TikTok is pretty easy to be on for hours. There's definitely athletes you guys have said you've worked with that just don't go to bed right away. They're on their phone scrolling for a little bit. I know it's gotten to me plenty of times. One of the easiest tricks is to just kind of do a little cleanse every now and then. And I'm not saying delete TikTok forever. I'm not saying delete Instagram forever. But when was the last time you took an app that you don't crucially need and just give yourself a little bit of break from it?
Yeah.
I think it's fairly healthy. If that's a day and that's a tough challenge for you, awesome. Celebrate that day. Even if it's maybe it's 6 hours. I don't know. If you can do a week, go for a week. But just make sure you're not dependent on anything. I think that's really big. Are there any quick tips that you guys have that have worked for you with time management?
Mine's been being specific. Like I can think of so many conversations right now with student athletes where I was like, okay, when are you going to get this done? Probably tomorrow. Probably tomorrow or tomorrow. And if tomorrow, what time tomorrow? You know, like if you are in this mindset of like, I'll get it done at some point, then I feel like it's a lot easier to say, well, I didn't say I was going to get it done at 6 p.m. or I didn't say I was going to work on it after practice. I've still got time to keep pushing it off. So I've been a huge proponent of like when my guys tell me when they're going to work on a thing, like I want you to tell me something specific because that way it's also easier to hold yourself accountable. You know, if it's 6 p.m. on Tuesday and that's the time you gave to yourself and you're not working on it, then, you know, that kind of gives you a little bit more push, I think.
Yeah.
I like that. I think, you know, with structure, there's natural routine, but also like for me, I feel like creating your own natural routine, like something that's like, this is what works for me and figuring that out, reflecting and figuring that out, I think is huge. You know, you mentioned Regan goes to the gym at 5 a.m. I go to the gym at 5 a.m. now, and I love it because, yeah, I know, dude, we're morning people. That's why we go to bed like, I don't know, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, pretty consistently.
I told you 9 o'clock was bedtime.
Yeah. But like for us, like that 5 a.m. wake up, some days it's tough, but like, I mean, it works because we're able to hold each other accountable in terms of like, oh, like, I was really tired. But I'm like, no, like, I know we're going to feel really good and a lot better after we do this. And like, it sets the tone for the day. It's really a game changer.
Definitely.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that needs to be 5 a.m., get up and go work out for everyone, but like figuring out like what your routine is that helps you get going and get started to set you up to have a day, I think is big.
Yeah. Nick, I think we talked about that with Caleb for a second. Like that's that self-discipline piece, that intrinsic motivation that you have to have, or you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, all right, nobody else is making me do this. Nobody else is doing this for me. This is what I want to accomplish, whether it be over the next hour, day, week, month, whatever it is. This is what I want to accomplish. And this is what I'm going to do. So I think y'all hit it spot on. You got to have something that gives you a reality check. You got to have something that is your baseline that you can come back to and say, all right, this is what I need you to ground me. I'm going to start here and I'm going to just go from there. It could be at 2:53 p.m. every single day. You have something that like, all right, what did I accomplish today? What am I supposed to be getting done right now? What do I need to come back to get myself in order? So that a personal accountability piece is huge.
Yeah, I think even beyond a time, if there's something that you do every day, if you know you're going to drive to and from work and that's just whenever that occurs, may fluctuate, that's when you reset. That's when you take a couple minutes to focus on your breath.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah.
But I completely agree. Having that anchor is huge.
That's a good word. Having that anchor. That's a good word, Nick. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. That's good.
I hope you got a whole quotes list by a year from now. Just publish a quotes list from Men the Mind. That'll be big. #1 seller.
I'm doing pretty good. I probably got like 5 to 7 on here right now. And we're pretty solid, right? Yeah, we're pretty solid.
That's massive.
So
yeah. And the other one that I'll throw out too, this is cheesy, but this works for some people. Does not work for me at all. I'm just like, nah, I'm not going to do it. Shout out Miss Sage at the store. Nat's laughing right now because Sage wants nothing more than to hang out with Nat. And Nat, why don't you hang out with Sage? Come on. She's texting me about it. No, they're friends though. Sage just says 3, 2, 1, do it, and she does it, and that works for her. I can't get my head around that, but it's just 3, 2, 1, do it. The only time I say that is with Russo, who we had on as well. There's a joke in one of the I Think You Should Leave skits. It's like 3, 2, 1, do it. Now you got to do it. And we usually use it sarcastically, so it'll be 3, 2, 1, do it. You got to trade me a first right now in Dynasty. Whatever works for you. Like Don said, you got to find it and go with it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Last thing is just the last couple of episodes, we've challenged people to take something and stick with it for a week, all about building some healthy habits. So this is our time to challenge the viewers. If there's anything you heard, if there's anything that came to your mind, go for it. Mike, you're going to be proud of me. Don't forget to like or subscribe to the podcast, to the channel, whatever it is that you're listening on. Going back around the horn, some of the options that we had, because rewinding is hard. In terms of building relationships, you can work to be more honest and transparent, whether that's at work, in your personal relationships. You could work to be more willing and desire to build together. This idea of we over me, or a growth focus. Also, a willing to listen, being compassionate, showing up with enthusiasm for the things that you do. And then for time management, we had a couple along the lines of deleting something that might not be the most productive and isn't crucial to your day. Just take it out of there. Being specific, don't give yourself a cop out later, and figure out a routine that works for you. Are there any that you guys are going to try this next week that you don't already do?
We got to be real specific right now. I know that.
I think for me, like from that list, we're in like our heavy advising time right now. And it's been really easy for me to get like frustrated and stressed. So I think, kind of leaning into like the building together, like this is what I can do. Like I need to be the best version of myself in order to best support my student athletes. So really making sure that I'm taking care of myself.
Yeah,
as well.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Specifically how?
That's good. I've been trying to get into journaling. I've been doing it very inconsistently, but I think journaling and reflecting at the end of the day, kind of decompressing that way. So I will journal every day after work this week.
Okay. Valid.
I like that. Jump off that. I feel like I really like, for me, like I wouldn't even call it yoga, but just like 10 minutes to stretch in the morning for me is like, that's where I can do my mindful breathing. Like I'm not doing some set thing. I like to do what I like to do, but if I can like do that consistently, that really helps me stay present and be more level-headed as I go into the day. So I'd like to definitely do that more often and set that kind of goal.
Yeah, I love that. So Mike, you want to, or you want me to?
Yeah. I'll jump there real fast. So I have been, this will be I guess a continuation of the past, maybe week or two here. But for me to continue to be honest about where I'm at, whether it's with work, and what my feelings around that, some of the relationships I have right now, and be honest with myself and the other parties involved. Like this past week at work, we just happen to do, I work in sales. So we happen to do this exercise prior to us kicking off our day. It was like, okay, what are some of your strengths? What are some of your weaknesses? And then what are some areas for opportunity? And then what are some things we can do as a team to make this a more cohesive unit? And strengths and opportunities kind of are relevant to this, but the piece that I want to hit on is strengths and what we can do as a team. Opportunities are what I want to hit on. And I said, there are days where I get here and I show up feeling like a zombie. And I said this in front of my entire team, my sales manager. And I was like, there are some days I'm just not mentally here. It's like a switch flips on in the morning. I get up, I start getting ready, and I get into that mode. I'm physically here, but I'm not always mentally present. And that actually led to us having a conversation later on, about 2 hours long, of just some experiences that he had, kind of where I was at. And we just had that real transparent talk. So continue to have those transparent conversations with myself and where I'm at, so I can just be settled kind of like internally with what I have going on.
Yeah, I like that. That definitely ties in with a couple of different ones. We had, but definitely that honesty and transparency piece. I think that one thing that stuck out from you that might not have been initially on the list is I don't probably share enough in conversations, like in that honesty and transparency piece. What I do say is honest and transparent, but the quantity of what I'm saying is probably not where it needs to be. Being better about that this week, I think, is a good goal. I think that ties in with putting my pride aside too. You don't always want to share when you're a little bit low energy at work, but maybe that's helpful information from the people that have around you. So just, getting out a little bit more on my own status where I'm at, I think is good for everybody in the office for me. So I'll practice that and I'll try to make something on the whiteboard. I've really been utilizing whiteboards at work. So anything that's been gratitude related or seeing opportunities more fruitful, there's just a prompt on the whiteboard. There's a little square and I fill it in once a day. So we'll try the energy levels or something like that.
Love that.
So another solid episode. One thing that we need to start doing, and at this time, this is so confusing because we're pre-recording 10, but we're going to put contact info for people in the bios. That seems like a first part. Yeah. Matt's writing this down right now, but there will be ways to reach out and contact anybody that we've got on that they have approved. They might not approve much. They might not actually want you guys to there will be something. So thank you guys for jumping on. A lot of really cool insight and really appreciate hearing what you guys had to share.
Thank you for having us. It was fun.
It was great. Great seeing you guys too.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Oh yeah.
It was.
So everybody listening, hope you have a great day. Once again, if you have time to like or subscribe, just a couple seconds, but
No. Great. Let me start with that. Not if you have time. You're already listening. You're already here. If you made it this far to the end, like, subscribe, share. Okay, there's not an option at this point. All right,
you owe it to yourself.
Hey, 3, 2, 1, do it. All right, 3, 2, 1, do it.
2, 1, do it. Be honest with yourself, because if you're still here, you probably liked it. Or leave some criticism in the comments. That works too. But do some sort of
very autonomy supportive. Liking them.
This is the exception. There's exception.
Everyone do it. They have to.
Right, exactly. Oh, we appreciate y'all. It's been a great episode. So, Men to Mind, episode 8. We signing off.